a Charlotte Mason approach because we're teaching the whole person.
Right,
And
exactly.
many of her methods reinforce specific habits. For example,
Mm,
the habit of full attention. Now, that's going to
that's
look
hard.
different
Mm-hmm. Right.
in different children.
Mm-hmm.
Some children will be able to give you their full attention better if they're jumping on a trampoline.
Yes.
Others,
Uh-huh.
if they are sitting staring at you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's one area in which you got to teach the child.
Yeah.
What but there are 60 different habits that Charlotte mentioned that we could work on with our children. The
Mm-hmm.
habit of obedience, the habit of cleanliness,
Yep.
the habit
Mm-hmm.
of orderliness, diligence, um, thoroughness, the
Mm-hmm.
habit of thanksgiving, being
Yeah.
thankful instead of
Mm.
complaining. So many
Right.
great habits.
Mm-hmm.
And really, if you're talking about the whole person,
Mm-hmm.
character is formed by habits.
Yes.
Your
Mm-hmm.
habits are what is going to shape your character and who you
Yep.
are becoming. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
huge part of our children's education as a whole person.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Two things are necessary to form a habit. Any habit, you need repetition.
Mm.
You've got to repeat it as often as possible without lapsing. Will get you there the fastest.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part.
Mm-hmm.
But then you also need motivation.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And we can motivate our children through encouragement.
Mm-hmm.
We can motivate them through examples, whether those are real people examples
Mm-hmm.
or the people we read about in the stories that we're
Yes.
giving them.
Mm-hmm.
And we can motivate them with consequences, both good and bad. Both
Mm-hmm.
of them are powerful motivators.
Right.
Um, so the same principles are going to hold true. At least I have found that they hold true with my neurologically typical children as well as with my autistic child.
Hmm.
The difference is with my neurologically typical children, I can go on Charlotte's suggested timetable.
Ah,
She
yes.
suggested you choose one habit, and
Mm-hmm.
that's going to be the one that you focus on, which is the same across the board.
Mm-hmm.
But she suggested a timetable of 6 to 8 weeks
Hmm.
for your regular children to get that habit up and running, get that plate spinning,
Right.
till it can go
Mm-hmm.
on its own. With my autistic child, I find that oftentimes, depending on what the habit is,
Right. Mm-hmm.
often it can take 6 to 8 months rather than
Yeah.
weeks.
Mm-hmm.
So if you go into it knowing that it's going to be a longer game,
Exactly. Uh-huh.
then you won't get as discouraged, hopefully.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go into it focusing on one habit, and I know
Yeah.
that's hard because all of us have all this
Yes.
list. Well, I need to work on this and that and this and that.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you what I'm doing right now with Hannah, and it's totally different because she's 22,
Mm-hmm.
but I have made a whole list of skills that I want her to learn so she will be better able to do self-care.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
Um, and so we introduced several months ago. Well, I won't mention what they are right now, but
Mm-hmm.
let's just say that out of this whole list, I had to choose one to start with.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're trying to figure out what habit to start with your child, I would say either attention or obedience,
Mm-hmm.
because attention is probably foundational. If they don't know how to pay attention, they're not going to hear what you're telling them to do, and so it's going to be harder to
Exactly.
obey.
Uh-huh.
Uh, and let me just throw in, I'm going to get back to my list with Hannah in just a second, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
going to chase a rabbit for a minute. I just started reading a book that's been really eye-opening.
Hmm.
It's called The Reason I Jump. Have you read that one yet,
I
Peggy?
have not. No.
Fascinating. It is written by
Hmm.
a 13-year-old autistic boy who does not have speech.
Mm-hmm.
He lives in Japan, and his mother designed a communication grid for him. so that he can now spell out words on this grid. And
Hmm.
and when he learned how to use that grid, it's like boom, all of this
Wow.
came out of him. And
Hmm.
they could ask him questions, as in, why do you jump?
Right.
And he could explain what he's thinking and feeling inside.
Hmm.
Now, we don't want to, of course, project his personal
Right.
thoughts and feelings on all autistic children. That is not
Right.
the case.
Mm-hmm.
But I am gaining some insights into what's going on in the heads.
Right.
And one thing that this boy mentioned that just might be a little help with this whole idea of the habit of attention
Mm-hmm.
or obedience is that he can be so tuned in to something, or what we would say tuned out,
Mm-hmm.
that an adult can be standing right here next to him and say something to him, and he has no clue that
Yep.
person has said anything at all,
Mm-hmm.
just because his brain has not processed it.
Yep.
But he said, if that person will say my name first,
Hmm.
that helps me shift and tune in to
Wow,
what he's
that's really
saying.
perceptive of him to know that. Yeah.
Yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
you might try it and see. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know, but
Yeah.
it's just an idea. Okay, back
Yeah.
to Hannah's thing. We're looking at over this past year, I went back and looked at where I just put a little start date on each of those tasks, each of those
Ah,
habits
that's a
I'm
great
trying
idea.
to
Mm-hmm.
teach her. And we just go until it is running on its own and she's comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't see regression. I see it's going fine. Then
Mm-hmm.
I will choose another one. And this past year, I was able to get through two and a half,
Hmm.
which
That's good.
I thought was phenomenal. I
Yeah.
was so excited. We got through two and a half of those this past year. So um, just be encouraged. And I would especially, it may not look like habit training
Mm-hmm.
time wise with other children,
Right.
but it can still work. Just be in it for the long haul and don't give up. Your child is worth
Yeah.
your efforts, your
Mm-hmm.
perseverance.